And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Um, in this third segment, we are going to be talking about a potential Trae Young trade that could be happening in the near future, given as how the Atlanta Hawks have the number one pick in the draft. So I'm looking at this article real quick, and by Alex Lord. He's talking about the possibility that the Hawks could shake up the roster. So the two biggest dominoes are easily what they do with the number one pick and DeJounte Murray or Trae Young trade. So they have the number one pick in the draft, and it seems that this French kid Alex Sarr is going to be the favorite to land that number one spot. So again, he's a 7-foot Frenchman. I have no idea why these people from France are so tall. Victor Wembanyama, but like he could be considered, he's at least, there's a lot of people that think he is going to be the next unicorn in the NBA. Now, unicorn, it means somebody who is super tall but is super gifted at everything on the basketball court. He can shoot, it's like an anomaly. Like, for example, Kristaps, he was the first unicorn in the NBA because, he was just an anomaly. He was a super tall big man, 7'3", that could, again, he could play the defense and he could do the regular things that a center could do with ease, but he could also shoot the ball. And he could do a lot of things with the ball in his hands, which is something that was rare for someone that was super tall. So, looking at this article a little bit more, the more notable decision looming for Atlanta is which point guard will they build around. So, it's like they'll get Sarr, like, off the number one pick, and then they will figure out which point guard is going to run the offense with Sarr. So it's they're sort of struggling exactly like which guard they're going to pick. A Trae Young trade would net more assets in return to build around his counterpart, but he's certainly the better player of the two. So the Hawks will have to weigh the possibilities against each other. It's like if you trade Trae Young, you're going to get a lot more pieces, but you're going to get a weaker point guard. If you trade DeJounte, you're going to get a lot less pieces, but a stronger point guard on your team. So, more recently, a report revealed that clubs may value DeJounte Murray over Trae Young, which I mentioned earlier, like before on a different podcast. But it's not too surprising because, Murray would be cheaper financially and might not cost as much capital in potential trade. And secondly, he's a much bigger point guard that is an asset defensively rather than a liability compared to Trae Young. Now, he doesn't have the offensive ceiling that Trae Young has, but an acquiring team might not need him to be that number one option if they're trading for DeJounte. So with that being said, Young is still a superstar regardless of the last couple of seasons. He's basically, like I've said before, he's consistent in averaging at least 25 points per game and 10 assists per game as well. Nearly every club in the NBA would be infinitely better with Trae Young instead of their current point guard, which is saying a lot, but like most of the teams, yes, they would be a lot better off having Trae Young as their point guard as opposed to whoever they have. Except for the Knicks, who have Brunson. And the Warriors, who have Steph. And the Thunder, who have Shai. And the Mavericks, who have Luka. And let me think, what other team? Oh, the Pacers would definitely be better off with Trae Young as opposed to Halliburton. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. So, because if a Trae Young trade nets Brandon Ingram straight up, like, there's a that's at least what the article is saying. Like, the world has gone crazy in this Bleacher Report hypothetical from Zach Buckley. The Hawks give up their best player in exchange for the Pelicans' second best player. Like, so there's growing possibility that they could trade Trae Young for Brandon Ingram, which it would be very odd. Like, I just don't see Trae Young on the Pelicans. Like, I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. And I genuinely think that trading DeJounte would be a much better option. Like, I've said this before on the podcast. I think trading DeJounte Murray for Brandon Ingram and pairing him with Trae Young and the rookie Alex Sarr, that would be a very, very good lineup to have. I really like the lineup. However, I think the biggest thing that they're really thinking about is the lack of defense. Like, because Trae Young and Brandon Ingram, they aren't really known to being like defenders like that. They aren't really known to having the defense. But again, like I've said before, DeJounte does have the defense, and that is something that could be considered really, really valuable for other teams. Now, a trade of DeJounte Murray straight up for Brandon Ingram seems more in line with their values. Brandon Ingram is a 6'9" wing. This is what the article is saying. With that can get his own shot, but he's not some superstar. He's made one. Okay, there goes the page just lagging. He's made one All-Star appearance and has never led his team further than the first round of the playoffs, and isn't capable of shouldering the load offensively. Young, on the other hand, has made it to the conference finals and is capable of taking over offensively and is an all-NBA talent. Ingram has averaged fewer than 22 points and about 5 assists in his 2 postseason series. Young, who has been in the league 2 fewer seasons, averages over 26 points and 9 assists per game in 5 postseason series. And what's even crazier is if you take out the series against the Heat in 2022, when Miami blitzed Trae Young without a second ball handler, he is averaging over 28 points and nearly 10 assists in 4 playoff series. And it's like trading Trae Young directly for Brandon Ingram is a horrible trade. Like, the two just don't measure up. Like, they don't measure up the exact same. So if you're going to give up Brandon Ingram, you're going to have to give up other assets. I don't think the Hawks are going to accept that trade. Now, DeJounte for Brandon Ingram, that's a totally different story. And, like, it would really, like, again, suggesting a straight-up trade between Ingram and Trae Young, it's, like, it's a completely different. Like, they are not on the same level. Trae Young is up here, and Ingram is, like, right over here. Like, they are not on the same level whatsoever. It would be a really bad trade, in my opinion, if they just, directly swap stars. And it would also, I think it would be really bad for Sarr if they drop Trae Young, because Trae Young is a very, very good point guard. He can run the pick and roll almost perfectly, and he can create looks for the center so much easier, and it would make Sarr's life and him adjusting to the NBA that much easier, in my personal opinion. I genuinely think that Trae Young should stay on the Hawks, and, like, if the Hawks are going, they should not trade him. If they're going to trade anyone, you got to trade DeJounte. It's that simple. There's going to be a lot of naysayers out there. They're going to say, Trae Young, I don't see Trae Young as a 1 or a 2 option. I see him as a 3rd option. That's just not true. Like, I'm sorry to say it, just not true. You know exactly who you are. Not true whatsoever. He is a very solid 1 or 2 option on a team. He can definitely do it. He's almost done it before. He's almost done it being a number 1 option. He was just a couple of games off of doing it, but he almost did it. Now all that's left is for him to get the help that he needs, and if he's provided with that help, he could without a doubt be a number 1 or a number 2 option on a championship team. I have no doubt about it. But with that, we are out of time for this 3rd segment, so now I will go ahead and go into the 4th segment where I talk about Caitlin Clark dropping 30 points and still losing. So, again, I've said that these segments are a little bit shorter than usual. I apologize for that, but that is mainly because I started the show a little bit late, and again, I'm sorry for that. But now we will go ahead and go into the 4th segment where I talk about Caitlin Clark dropping 30 points, which is nothing short of impressive, but unfortunately the team still lost. So I'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.